Hey, good morning, everyone. Josh's Severe Weather. Happy weekend to you. Reporting from Raleigh, I'm a meteorologist, and I'm here to chat more about the tropics and where threats may form here in the coming weeks. So, we're going to be talking a lot about that. I'll also be taking a look at the continued threat for severe weather and flash flooding across portions of the northern U.S. and heat that continues to build from the central states into the southeast and mid-Atlantic next week as we deal with some of our hottest temperatures in a few summers potentially, where the conditions have been super dry. So we're just getting started here with the tropics. We did have Tropical Storm Alberto. We had another disturbance which was close to depression strength. That's for debate, but that has moved into Georgia now. And possibly another system forming here in the southwestern Gulf this weekend. Right now, the ceiling is pretty low on it, but it could become a tropical depression. Outside chance we get our next tropical storm barrel. And that's going to be short-lived as it heads into Mexico here by the beginning of next week. Now, as we get into the next couple of weeks, we are going to be kind of clawing away at things to see what's going to form. There's no extremely strong signal for the time being, but we've got a couple of areas to watch. Fronts that are coming off the East Coast here are going to be into increasingly warm waters over the Gulf Stream, and it doesn't take much to get something to spin up. We saw that a few days ago. So we'll be watching here for some decaying fronts. Probably nothing strong at this point, but we may get a system at some point in the next couple of weeks. But the area that I'm starting to grow not concerned about, but at least more wary of, is down here across the main development region and across the Caribbean. We are going to start to see a gradual shift to more favorable conditions environmentally for some storms to form. Right now, nothing's showing up on the models definitively, but certainly that potential looks like it's going to climb. And what I'm going to do is kind of break down why that is here in the next, say, 5 to 10 minutes. So right now, here's a broad view of the tropics. We do have the Central American gyre, which has shifted westward towards Mexico. A weak surface circulation here in the southwest Gulf that bears watching for it to become a depression. The signal on this is not as good as it was a few days ago. I'll kind of talk about that here in a little bit. We also have basically what was Invest 92L, which I personally think could have been a depression briefly yesterday morning, but again, it's not anything but a rainmaker for coastal sections here. That is inland and will be kind of going in this direction, but falling apart as it does so. And then the rest of the tropics are fairly quiet. We do see a wave axis here, our monsoon trough, a couple of healthier waves coming across, but into some stronger wind shear and into conditions that aren't super favorable yet for development. It's still early in the season. I know last year we did see a couple of storms down there in June. This year, I think that chance is a little bit lower, but it is still a chance nonetheless. So here's a look at the Caribbean. You can see overall it's a quieter day across the Western Caribbean than yesterday. We do have some flare-ups here near the Caymans, but overall things are actually quieting down. Some sinking air coming in from the north that is creating that less than ideal environment for storms to form. But we still have a lot of rain here on the Sierra Madre side of Central America. And this area does need your prayers. It's been very difficult with all of the rain that they've had down there over the last week or so. Here is our circulation over the Western Gulf, and very lopsided right now. I'm going to show you that in just a second. And you know, it still bears watching here. And again, the same areas that got hit last week are going to see more rainfall. The Western Atlantic overall is pretty quiet. We don't have anything super organized. There is our circulation here over southeast Georgia. It'll be heading in this direction inland and weakening as it does so. We do have a little bit of a flare up here over the Central Atlantic on the tail end of another boundary, but it doesn't look like anything that should form. You can see it pulses and then it kind of dies off. And then we've got an upper level trough way out in the Central Atlantic, so that's going to kill any chances of development out in that part of the ocean. Here's another look at that trough for you guys to see. Upper level trough right here, spinning well. No surface circulation, though, and it is drawing westerlies across the Central Atlantic, keeping things at bay. See, the thing is, when we've got all these waves down here, they just continue west towards South America. They don't get into an area where they can form into something pretty big. Now, next week and the following week, we may start to see this shift a little bit north and west into an environment that's more favorable. So those of you in the islands, the Leeward and Windward Islands, while it's quiet for the time being, now is the time to start getting ready for a rainier pattern over the next couple of weeks, at the very least. And in the Eastern Atlantic, nothing of any major concern for the time being. So right now, from the Hurricane Center, our area that has moved inland is not going to develop. This is our next feature here, a 50-50 shot at it becomes a depression. No mention of tropical storm at this point, but really we've got about 2 days before it heads inland. The Eastern Pacific right now is quiet. The remains of Alberto are moving away from land, but into cooler waters. The European ensemble shows our chance for potentially a depression, and it's about 70 to 80% in here. So it's a pretty good chance, but it's going to be short-lived. You can see by Monday that chance wanes. There is a bias here that we try to see all these circulations that form depressions in the southern Caribbean from this particular ensemble. That's not going to happen. But as we move on in time, you will see there is a bit of a signal here close to the Northwest Caribbean here towards the end of next week. We also see, for now, small chances, but 10-20% chance. Some of our ensembles showing some areas that need to be watched over the main Atlantic. Also kind of keeping an eye on things off the Carolina coast. But again, this is not anything too threatening for the time being, but we are going to be tracking waves as they come across. The first one that comes into the Gulf here at the very end of June, we're talking a week from tomorrow, right now showing a 30% chance that it becomes a depression. But again, that's 8 days away. That could certainly change some more. So interesting setup yesterday, 92L, a lot of debating online. I'm not going to get too much into it. My only, I guess, pet peeve with this is why are we not calling this something when it does have the wind field for it? But we had Tropical Storm Gert way out in the middle of the Atlantic last August without any plane flying into it. You can see Gert did, by the way, survive and get better like 4 or 5 days after this was taken, but just no concentration of storms, and this was a tropical storm. Here we had the concentration, and we didn't even have a depression, and it was actually affecting land. So again, I'm not going to sit here and debate it, but I did joke about justice for Invest 92L. That was a joke, by the way. I hope you guys took that as a joke. But in all seriousness, the planes got in there yesterday morning. Pressure was high, but the surrounding pressure was higher. So we did have winds in this area that got over 35 miles per hour. And there was a surface circulation. That's what these dots here are for. Yes, we find a surface circulation and thunderstorms on the south. So I think if we go back at the end of the season and do a post-mortem, we do call this a depression, but not my call. Anyway, it's over land right now. You can see that circulation right here in southeast Georgia. All the good rains are offshore, but they should migrate westward, and we are going to see potentially some locally heavy rainfall. Less when you get up into this part of the coast, but we may see an increase in moisture. Inland around Columbia, Charlotte, just nothing going to happen, unfortunately. We need some rain. It's been over a week since I've gotten rain in Raleigh. Unfortunately, that doesn't look like it's going to change this weekend. Whatever's left of it heads back out to sea. I don't think it's going to develop at this point. It gets merged with a cold front. Rain chances do climb this morning. And at the coast of Georgia, you know, if we're looking at like Sea Island, those areas, Jekyll Island, we could see locally up to an inch of rain today. But the heaviest stuff, the 3 to 4 inch rains, remain off the coast, which doesn't really help us where we need the rain. So take what we can get at this point, but it's not looking like a big rainmaker. Northeastern Florida, basically east of 95, we do see a better chance, but it's going to be somewhat sporadic here. When we get inland towards I-75, it just doesn't look like a good chance for any kind of significant rain. So the drought looks like it's going to continue to increase across this area here in the next week. Here's a look at 93L, and you can see there is a mid-level circulation here and probably somewhat of a low-level circulation here. Because it's so tilted, it's not in a great spot to develop. At the very least, so we do see the potential for heavy rain in here and some gusty wind. But this is smaller than Alberto, and the Northern Gulf, unlike last week, is pretty much dry. There's actually some what we call subsidence, some sinking air coming in from the north that's getting into this and keeping it from forming into anything. So there's quite honestly a pretty decent chance we don't even get a depression out of this. We just get a blob that moves inland by Monday morning. Either way, I'm going to track it for you guys just in case, but we're not going to see it adding to the storm tally very much. Here's where our models take it, west-northwestward. And continuing off to the west. About a week ago, these models had it coming up closer to South Texas and turning up the coast. The reason that's not happening is our region of high pressure that was supposed to be just suffocating the Northeast has ended up farther south. So it hasn't gotten quite as hot up there, but instead trending hotter and drier for parts of the mid and deep South. And that's what's keeping this suppressed. So thankful for that, I guess, but we do need the rain in the Southeast. Here's a look at wind shear. The brighter colors are indicating where wind shear is hostile. And you can see right now around our trough, very hostile conditions over the area where we would potentially see development. The Western Gulf, things are kind of marginal in here. We do have that opening for something to form, but overall, it's not looking great for this depression here. Now, as we move things along in time, excuse me, I got an itch. What we will see is the Southern Gulf continues to have wind shear here, so it's going to be tough to get something to pop up. But as we head out towards the end of next week, what we will see is overall somewhat better environment here for something to form. The wind shear does drop off in this area of red here. Sorry to see it because it's pink. It does kind of migrate northward, and that opens up a little bit more of a channel for a system to form and ventilate a little bit and grow in size. It's not great. Climatologically, we're not there yet, but at least we see somewhat of a signal for things to improve when it comes to that potential for storm development. I do think it takes time. If you look at the Caribbean here in early July, this is the second, we still have pretty good westerly wind shear. But as we get later towards the 4th of July and beyond, the wind shear isn't exactly that strong. So it'll have to come in low and underneath this, but we may get something to survive towards the Yucatan. Again, that's speculation. Another thing I like to show folks is the amount of divergence aloft. The greens indicate more favorable divergence, and when you got storm clouds that grow and then spread out, that's when you have better conditions for development. When you see the brown on here, that's when things are not as favorable. Things are converging and kind of killing things off. But over the next couple of days, you can see we still have some green here, but it's mainly across Central America. If you draw this trough here where things are diverging from, it's pretty far south. We want to see it a little bit farther north if we want to get development, but it's favorable at least over the next week or so. You can kind of see that in here. Now, as we head towards the end of the month, it looks like it may try to trend more unfavorable. So we've got to keep an eye more on this part of the Atlantic for waves to form and head in this direction. It's not impossible. It's just not as favorable, if that makes sense to everybody watching here. But as we move this along into early July, again, this model says things are a lot more favorable way out in the open Atlantic than they have been so far this season. They're not as favorable here in parts of the Caribbean and the Gulf. So our gyre that we've seen for a few weeks probably is not coming back here for the time being. So we'll watch that for you guys. That model, that ensemble, is certainly not gospel when it comes to forecasting. It's just kind of a general idea. Here's a look at the GFS. You can see cloud cover over the Southern Gulf, Northwest Caribbean, and South Florida here this weekend. Weak system, and the pressure on this is higher, so it's probably not going to be much of a system if it is one, but it's already moving onshore here tomorrow night and inland on Monday. We still have waves of moisture coming into the area from the southeast. We'll keep an eye again on the Southern Gulf. There's at least somewhat of a trough that comes in here by the beginning of July that we have to keep an eye on. It may get into a more favorable spot in the southwestern Gulf. If it comes farther north, I don't think it's as favorable, and here's the reason why. You see this big high dropping down here before the 4th of July. That would send drier air and more wind shear into the northern Gulf. So if there is something, it's probably more aimed towards the southern Gulf of Mexico. But overall, we continue to see waves coming into the islands and moving across the southern Caribbean. And again, this is just one run of the GFS. Here is a wider view of the Canadian, and this one looks a little different than the GFS. You can see more moisture kind of settling in here, and it tries to form another gyre here next weekend. I don't know if that's necessarily happening, but you can kind of see this pattern looks like it repeats itself. But another thing here on the Canadian that you will notice is that we start to see more wave action coming farther north. Before, previously, everything moved into South America. Now, you see that things are kind of more setting up here, more in a train. So we still have a big area of high pressure in here that protects us, but we have a little bit more of I guess, an open lane, if you want to call it that, for something to try to form and pop up in here. So signal is not super great yet, but it is improving. I think as we head into July, that signal does start to build. As you guys can see here, what's going on is rather than there being a big high over the southeast, we've got a boundary here and this ridge building west, and that increases our chances to see something survive as it comes across. Here's the European model, and over time you can still see that we've got a lot of dry air coming down into the eastern Atlantic, but we start to open up this window for more clouds later next week, and we've got multiple waves to just kind of keep an eye on at this point over the southern portion of the Atlantic basin, including the Caribbean Sea. And the GFS model shows the same lanes here, but again, it looks a little bit different than some of the other models. I try not to get too concerned with what shows up here 372 hours from now, but you can see things do look like they're going to trend into a more favorable spot by the time we get to July. Here are ensemble solutions, and you can see a signal for maybe something weak over here in the Western Caribbean at the end of next week. More low pressure showing up. They're not super low, but more system potential over the main development region. Again, I'm not seeing anything that really sticks out yet. We may see one of those make it into the Southwest Gulf at the beginning of July, but maybe a little bit better signal after that. You can start to see some more solutions showing something in the Western Caribbean. Let me zoom in just to kind of give you guys a closer view of that. Again, it's not a great signal, but maybe showing something here in about 2 weeks. So just keep an eye on it right now. At the very least, I think we're going to see more activity down there than what we've seen so far. All right, let's shift gears and look at the U.S. We've got flooding and severe weather to chat about. We also have heat. Here's how things are set up on our water vapor. Big trough in here, and that's drawing moisture up from the southwest and bringing us some severe weather and more heavy rain across the same places that have been dealing with it pretty much all week long. Big area of high pressure down here. That is bringing the dry flow down into the Gulf of Mexico. And then here is our advancing canopy of clouds coming up from the Gulf of Mexico. Also, our weak feature here, you can kind of see the wind shear coming around from the northwest. So that's going to kill it and keep it from doing anything too mischievous at this point. As we look at the hazards map, we see greens indicating flood watches. We see oranges indicating heat advisories, both in the mid-Atlantic, mid-east, as well as in California and Utah. And all this moisture coming up into the southwest ahead of schedule here for New Mexico. We've seen significant flooding in places like Las Vegas, New Mexico, not Nevada, but New Mexico. And unfortunately, that is a product of all the heat that we had last week and then monsoonal moisture coming up from Mexico from the tropics. We have a moderate threat for significant rain and flooding over Wisconsin, over eastern Iowa, southern parts of Minnesota, a slight risk for the rest of the Great Lakes and for portions of southern New England. Marginal risk for flooding here, but I really don't see it happening. And I would be a little bit more concerned about the Four Corners area, especially Arizona here throughout the day today. Here's a closer view of that, by the way. Sorry, I should have showed you that first. Severe weather chances are there. We may see a stray tornado. I hate to say stray because it'll impact somebody, but another weekend, if you're planning outdoor plans here in the Northeast, be on the lookout for it. More back in the Midwest today. And you can see the tornado chances right now aren't showing up, but I do think there's a slight chance, better chance to the Great Lakes, which I'll show you in a minute. Better chance for severe wind for today and maybe some hail as well. But tomorrow, things do change, and I do think we see more robust storms as our front moves into the area. We do have a slight risk posted from basically the Pennsylvania Turnpike all the way up through New England into southeastern Quebec. And a marginal risk extends to the coastline and all the way down into central Virginia, back into the Tennessee Valley, and even into Arkansas. There is some tornado risk tomorrow, and I do think it's something we've got to watch here in New England and upstate New York. But even in Pennsylvania and all the way down into southern New England, we do have somewhat of a chance for that. Severe wind chances in here as well, and some hail potential. So more classic type supercell storms we need to keep an eye on tomorrow afternoon. The NAM does show this, by the way. As I move things ahead for you, you see the area of very heavy rainfall across Canada, but we also see scattered showers and storms across the entire Northeast here, especially interior areas. And our best chance for severe weather is going to be between 4 and 8 o'clock today. Tomorrow, we see a greater coverage of these storms. You'll see rain moving through northern New England. It's going to come down pretty hard. I guess that's better than 98 if you're in Caribou, by the way, but it's not pretty. Here's a look at the afternoon, though. We're going to see kind of two waves firing up. First one here, Hudson Valley into New England. Second one along our boundary, moving into PA and New York. I'm more concerned about the first one than the second one, but we don't want to ignore the second one either. This front is going to drop south and east, and we should start to see more comfortable conditions by morning on Monday in the Northeast. You can see the parameters for tornadoes do start to climb as well. They're not great today, but as we get into the day tomorrow, wind shear picks up. We have some more instability. You can start to see some oranges and pinks in here, especially in Vermont and New Hampshire, but also across Connecticut, Massachusetts, and upstate New York, and even into PA. This is 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, 6, 7. So we've got a window here from about 1 p.m. in New England to about 7 p.m. across the rest of the Northeast before things do settle down in the evening. So keep an eye on that. Also, keep an eye on the heavy rain threat. 3 to 6 inches in parts of Canada, 1 to 3 across portions of New England, and locally heavy rains even into Kentucky and West Virginia. I know you need the rain down here, so that's not a bad thing, but unfortunately, the places that need it more are not seeing much of that, at least through Monday morning. That would be Virginia, Southern Maryland, into the Delmarva and South Jersey. We're still relatively dry. In the Midwest, we are going to see more active weather in the upcoming week here. Slight risk today. Tornado chances north and west of Chicago are greatest, also across central Michigan. Severe wind across this area and severe hail as well. Tomorrow, that threat moves to your south, but does get down into the Tennessee Valley. It's marginal for the time being, but again, we're going to have to watch. Marginal means there's still a chance. And then Monday, our next system reloads and moves into this area. We could see more significant weather next week in the upper Midwest. Here is that possibility of significant severe weather, so strong winds and hail over Minnesota primarily here later on Monday. The NAM model shows us we're going to have heavy rain. Here's one circulation moving through Michigan this afternoon. Here are storms firing on the tail end of it over Iowa and Wisconsin. These will move into Illinois and northeast Missouri this evening and then fade tonight. Tomorrow, we're going to see more storm development. Again, the NAM isn't super excited about Kentucky or Tennessee, but shows some stuff dropping southward. And then we should see a quieter day on Monday across the Great Lakes. Tornado chances are a little bit higher than what I like to see, but they're not super high. Certainly, there's a window for something in here to become severe and produce a tornado. Same goes for central Michigan, not just the Mississippi Valley we got to worry about, but the Michigan side of things as well. We may see a tornado or two in here. Tomorrow, though, things are going to be a little less active across the Great Lakes, more active in the Ohio Valley potentially. And I'll show that to you guys here. Potentially a little bit more active in the Ohio Valley, but our parameters for tornadoes aren't super high. Maybe eastern Ohio and the northern panhandle of West Virginia in the afternoon, but not super great here across Kentucky or Tennessee. We still need to watch it, though, but right now I don't think it's a main threat. Heavy rainfall expected again today. Look at some of these totals, 3 to maybe 6 inches of rain in parts of Iowa and upper Michigan and right into the Huron Bay and George's Bay area. I think that's it, George's Bay. Maybe I'm wrong. But you can see it's just going to be very wet for the next 24 hours. Unfortunately, the places that really do need the rain are not going to see a good threat for it. Even Detroit, probably not going to see much. Our best chances are going to be north of this Illinois-Wisconsin border and across the northern half of lower Michigan. As we get to next week, things remain active. We're not done after this front moves through. You can see our next system here across the prairies on Monday morning. That is going to advance south and east. There's a potential to see a pretty big complex of storms in the upper Midwest here Monday into Tuesday, and then maybe more storms Tuesday night and Wednesday farther south and east. So we are going to see a return to stormier weather in parts of the Mid-South here for the middle part of next week, and then perhaps more storms beyond that in the same places that are getting it now, Minnesota, Iowa, Dakotas. Also, better chance for some weather across parts of the Southeast. But somewhere in here, there is an opportunity for a derecho to form. I just can't tell you where and when exactly at this point. So we'll watch it. Take a look at the high temperatures today. 90s, maybe some upper 90s, close to 100 here in the mid-Atlantic today. Tomorrow, still pretty toasty in the Northeast as our front is going to move into the area. Getting hotter across parts of the deep South here. We're going to see a few triple digits. And then the heat does relax from the Northeast, but it builds for the South. And you can see Missouri and Arkansas all the way over to the Carolinas. We are going to be pushing triple digits on Monday. Tuesday looks very hot, 104 in Macon, Georgia, potentially 106 in Statesboro, 106 in Augusta, 103 in Columbia, maybe 100 in Raleigh on Wednesday. This is the European model. Take it with a grain of salt. It's probably just a bit too high, but nonetheless, you can see we have some record high potential in portions of the Southeast. And that heat does spike back into the Northeast for a day or two before it cools off here Thursday and Friday of next week. We'll look at the central U.S. because I'm not going to ignore you guys. Oklahoma starting to get hot. Kansas and Missouri starting to get hot as we see triple-digit heat building. Eastern Colorado, Utah. Phoenix was 117 yesterday. I don't see a big break from the heat coming. It's actually going to get more humid with this monsoonal moisture coming in on schedule pretty much. But you can see we are going to see significant heat for much of the central and eastern U.S., with the exception of the northern tier over the next several days. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. I am heading out on vacation. I'm going to try to do some videos, but taking tomorrow off as I travel. We'll see how the laptop goes. This will be a first for me, but I really do appreciate you guys, and I thank you for watching. As always, I want to give all the honor, all the glory, all the thanks to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. God has continued to bless me in many ways by bringing people like you to me so that I can help you guys be prepared for the weather. It's a wonderful calling, but what's really great is being able to just share what's most important to me, what matters the most. Paul tells the church of Ephesians 2:8-10, that for by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus unto good works, which God hath before ordained that we should walk in them. And before I became a believer, about 11 years ago, I was boastful for sure. I had some pride in what I was doing, but I didn't realize that in the end, it's not going to matter, because there's an uncertain future for people who don't believe. And I don't know what it is because I'm not there. But I have chosen to accept the gift of God, that grace that will save me through my faith, and give me the ability to declare that our Lord and Savior is Jesus Christ, that the good works we're doing is actually from above. It's God's workmanship, and we should continue to walk in that path. So I'm not going to judge you on whatever you believe. That's the choice I've made, but I do want to share that good news for you because it has changed my life and it has changed my eternal future. For whatever you're praying about, I'm happy to pray with you and for you. I'm going to have some more time to actually do that here next week. But as always, I thank you guys for joining me today, and I hope you have a safe weekend. See you soon.